How's it going? My name is Rob Knight. I'm a Lumix luminary and I'm with digitalphotoadventures.com, and I'm going to talk to you about setting up my Swarovski STX85 scope using the Digidapter and the Panasonic Lumix GH4 and the Lumix 20mm f1.7 lens. Okay, so I've got the DRX sleeve for the Swarovski. This is an STX eyepiece. And you need this in order to attach your Digidapter. So what you do is unscrew the original eyepiece, and this is actually the adapter eyepiece, but your eyepiece will come off just like that. You're going to look for this notch inside the sleeve, okay, or the pin here, and it's going to align with the notch on the bottom of the scope. There's only one way this thing can go on, and it's pretty easy. So it just slides in there, line up the notch, put it all the way in. And then you're going to take the eyepiece that comes with the sleeve, with the DRX sleeve, thread it on, tighten it up, there you go, and you're ready to go. Okay, when you get your Digidapter, it's going to come just like this. It's already assembled. You've got these two screws that you're going to use to adjust the stage to the height and the side-to-side adjustment there. You've got this screw that is going to fit into the bottom of your camera. Okay, if you need to move this screw over to fit wherever your particular tripod socket is, you can slide it to the back of the stage and then unscrew it here. It will come right out. So if you're trying to take it out and it's difficult to remove, then you probably got it cross-threaded, so stop it should come out very easily by hand. So I'm going to keep mine in the center groove here. You've already also got these two locating pins. Okay, when you get your camera set up where you need it, then you're going to basically attach these nice and tight so that when you go to put the camera back on the stage, then you just line them up with your pins and the camera's going to go right back where it needs to go in order to mate with your scope. Okay, so I'm going to put the Lumix GH4 on here, and in order so I can reach it and see what's going on, I'm going to go ahead and attach the Digidapter here. I've got the sleeve already on my STX eyepiece, and so this is an interesting little bit different than you might see. I've got the Really Right Stuff bracket on here, but it also has a 1/4-20 thread just in front of the regular tripod screw. So that means I can attach this without having to worry about taking off my mount. If you have a different tripod plate on your camera, then you might want to remove that. Obviously, if there's no threaded hole, then you're going to have to take off your tripod plate in order to mount it. So I'm going to just line up that 1/4-20 screw with the 1/4-20 hole there and loosely tighten it up. So the idea when you're setting this up is that you want the camera to be as close as possible to the eyepiece so you don't have a lot of stray light coming in from the sides, and you don't want any vignetting around the edges of your image. Okay, there's a couple of ways to do this, and you're going to use these two screws on the bottom of the stage. You can see there's a slot side to side, and then there's a slot up and down in the front. So basically I've got these screws finger tight, so if I loosen this one and this one, then now I can move the stage around quite a bit. So I can go left and right, up and down, okay? And then I can just finger tighten it again. Obviously when I get it to where I want it, I'm going to use the Allen wrench and really crank those suckers down. But there's several different ways you can do that. Whatever you're comfortable with really is the right way. So in this case, I'm going to start by sort of eyeballing where the camera is and try to sort of line it up with the eyepiece there. So I've got it left to right, or top to bottom there, and left to right. And now in this case with the Lumix 20mm 1.7, I know that I want this thing zoomed all the way out to as close focus as it will go. So I'm going to turn this ring using the back of the screen here and turn it out until I get to the closest setting. Looking right here.
We're looking there.
I'm
okay.
close, going there. Now if you look at the front of the camera, that extends this front of the lens as far as it will go. Okay, and that's what you want. You want that to go out as far as it'll go, and then I'm going to scooch this in. I'm going to loosen the 1/4-20 on the bottom of the camera and scooch that in until it basically contacts the rubber of the eyepiece. Okay, so I'm looking at the screen. I don't see any vignetting. I'm looking side to side and top to bottom to see if I need to center that at all, and that looks good. So I'm going to tighten these screws a little bit more, and I'll use the Allen wrench. Now the nuts are captive on the other side, so you don't have to have a tool to hold the nuts still on the other side here. They fit inside of that channel, so they hold themselves still. and then I'm good to go, and I'm nice and centered. I'm going to double check again on the top. That looks great. Okay, now I'm going to use the register pins here, these red pins. I'm going to loosen those, and I'm going to slide them against, in this case I'm using my Really Right Stuff bracket. So lock it there, and then do the same thing on the other side. Hold it tight. Okay, so now the idea is that I can take the camera off and loosen that screw and take the camera off. Okay, now I've still got my register pins here, and all this is locked in. So when I want to put it back on, I'm going to turn the camera off. Okay, and you can see the lens retracts back into the body of the lens. So I thread this in and slide it all the way forward. Okay, now I turn the camera on, and I've got the GH4 in manual focus mode, and then I'm just going to turn the focus ring until the front of the lens barrel comes out and contacts with my scope, and now I'm ready to go.
Now, Rob, we're back over here in macro mode still.
Well, we're focused as close as we'll go, and then the rest of the focus is going to happen with the scope itself. Okay, so I'll talk about some settings that I use on the GH4 when I'm shooting with the Digidapter and the STX85 Swarovski scope. I usually shoot in aperture priority mode, okay, because I'm going to want the aperture wide open on this 20mm f1.7 lens, so I get the most light into the camera that I can. And basically, if you zoom the scope, you're going to start cutting down the amount of light coming into the camera. So you definitely want to have as much aperture as you can get. So in this case, it's the f1.7. So I use aperture priority mode because then the camera is going to choose the correct shutter speed, or an appropriate shutter speed. So it's going to keep that as fast as possible. Okay, and another thing I do in order to keep that shutter speed as fast as possible is to use a higher ISO than you might think. Even if I'm shooting out in bright daylight, I'm going to use an ISO of about 800. That gives me shutter speeds of 4 or 5 thousandths of a second, which works great because any little vibration in a scope, when you're talking about 1,000 millimeters to 2,000 millimeter effective focal length, any vibration is going to show up as blur in your pictures. So the faster shutter speed, the better. Even on a bright sunny day, I'm still at ISO 800. The GH4 looks great at ISO 800. It works beautifully that way. So that's how I roll there. The other thing, I'm going to use the switch on the back here, and I'm in manual focus mode. Okay, this is your normal focus settings here, and I'm in manual focus. And you can see on the screen there that manual focus automatically sets off the focus peaking. Okay, that is by default. When you're in manual focus mode, your focus peaking is going to work, and it works beautifully with the scope as well.
You want to explain, Rob, a little bit about focus peaking?
Sure. Focus peaking basically gives you a little shimmering color highlight. In this case, it's the little orange shimmer here, where the image is focused. So when you're digiscoping, that's a huge help when you can see exactly what part of the image is in focus. So you want to, if you're shooting birds or something, then you would want to make sure that the bird's eye was exactly where that focus shimmer is. Let me move this and focus on a tree or something so it's not moving. Yeah, so that'll be better. So as I focus here, you can see the orange shimmer on the tree. So you can tell exactly where that plane of focus is. And one thing I've noticed with the GH, the focus peaking is a function of the monitor, okay? So if the image is too bright, sometimes it won't find as much contrast and the focus peaking doesn't work quite as well. So what I've done is just dialed down the exposure compensation a little bit. I use this button here. By default, this is your exposure compensation on the top. You'll push that and then dial this down to maybe minus a stop. But you'll notice as I dial that up, the focus peaking becomes much less obvious because you're getting less contrast on the screen. So I might underexpose it a little bit just to find my focus. Okay, and then I can see the focus peaking better, and then I'll dial my exposure compensation back to 0 before I shoot. Okay, if you want to adjust the focus peaking, notice mine is orange. I shoot a lot of nature photography and that kind of thing, so I'm using a green background or a green subject half the time. So you can change the color of that focus peaking. I press the menu set button. Okay, I'm in the custom wrench menu, and I'm on page 4 of 9, and I've got focus peaking. I touch there, and then I go to set. Now you can change the detection level, and that's going to basically determine how much contrast is needed to set off the focus peaking. I've got this on low, and you can change the color blue, orange, or white, and those colors are going to change a little bit depending on whether you're using high or low. So now I've got light blue, yellow, or green. So you can really fine-tune that to your particular subject of choice and what works better. You just do a little trial and error and check out what works for you, and then you go back, make sure that's on, and you're good to go. When you're using the 20mm Lumix lens on the GH4, you remember you're going to have to focus this lens out to mate with the eyepiece once you get your Digidapter set up. So I'm going to turn the camera on, make sure I'm in manual focus mode, and then I'm going to turn the dial, the focus ring, until you can do it one of two ways. You can look at the screen and just turn it until it's focused at its closest focus point, or you can just look over the top here and kind of eyeball it, and when that ring, when the front element of that lens is contacting with the eyepiece, then you know you're good to go. But as I shut the camera off, that does retract. So every time you turn the camera on, you're going to want to take that extra split second and just focus that lens, mate the front element of that lens back up with your eyepiece.
So Rob, the bottom line is you want, when we're all the way close focused over into what shows in the macro with the flower, at that time it hits that,
right,
it should
and that's
touch the rubber eyepiece at the same time,
right, and your stage should be set up and your register pin should be locked so that that's going to happen every time. So there shouldn't be really any guesswork. You just turn the camera on and turn this as far as it'll go to the right, and you'll be all set.
And then
it'll end up over here, and once it gets to that point, it'll stop. In other words, it doesn't go any further than that. So once it gets to where the eyepiece is touching it, it won't extend any further. As far as the GH4 goes, I want to touch on the electronic shutter just for a second. I usually use single shot, but you can switch here to multiple shot, which is basically your motor drive. So you can do up to 12 frames per second in your regular shooting with the GH4. I've talked to a lot of Digiscopers that are using the electronic shutter. And the way that you would turn that on, you press the menu set button here, and I'm in the record menu at the top on page 4 of 7, and I've got electronic shutter, and you can turn that on and off. Now if you turn that on, then instead of the mechanical shutter going, the sensor basically turns off and on electronically. So theoretically that would give you less vibration in the shot, and maybe that's true. I don't notice a lot of vibration with just the regular mechanical shutter. The problem with the electronic shutter is something called rolling shutter. And if your subject is moving at all, you can get this kind of effect, okay? It's the same thing that people complain about when they talk about DSLR video and rolling shutter. So if you're panning, you definitely don't want to use the electronic shutter. If you're shooting even birds that are moving, the way that it works, they could be kind of wonky, kind of funhouse mirror shapes sometimes. So I really don't ever use the electronic shutter. I know people that do use the electronic shutter, but just be aware, if your subject is moving at all, then the electronic shutter is definitely going to cause you problems in your final images.
So electronic shutter off.
That's what I do.
Okay.
Okay, if you're using the GH4 setup or whatever Micro Four Thirds setup and the Lumix 20mm 1.7, and you want to keep from having to reset the lens out at its closest focus distance over and over again when the camera shuts off, you can set the camera so that it won't turn off. Because if the camera turns off just to save the battery, then it's going to retract that lens and you're going to have to remember to spin it back out. So you can do that by pressing the menu set button on the GH4, and I'm in the wrench menu on page 3 of 6, and you're going to go to economy. Now in there, here you see sleep mode, and by default it's on 5 minutes. So you can turn that off so that it never goes to sleep if that's the issue. Now you have to keep in mind, if you do that, then your batteries are definitely not going to last as long, because the camera's not ever going to put itself to sleep. But if you want to keep from, if you're waiting for a bird or an insect or something like that, and you don't want to have to remember to turn the camera back on and spin the lens back out to that minimum focus, then you can do this and keep the camera from going to sleep. So one of the great things about Digidapter and working with Paul over there is that he can make modifications and changes based on whatever you need for your particular model. And a lot of us are using the GH4 now, so Paul knows exactly how to adapt these things specifically for the GH4. And there's one option that I think my buddy Tara Tanaka came up with for this. So I've got mine, I've got my special Arca Swiss plate on there, and I clip the camera right in. So Paul has relieved this side of the stage a little bit so that I can just pop the battery right out of my GH4 and change it without having to take it off the scope. So that's really handy, and that's just one example of the work that Paul can do, because I mean, let's face it, he makes these things himself. So whatever you need, you can just let him know and he can adapt. He can adapt the sleeves and the stage and the whole thing based on what you need and for your scope and your camera. Okay, when you're using the GH4 in particular, I think the focus peaking and some of the other features on the GH4 make it uniquely suited for digiscoping. I'm kind of a wuss when it comes to this stuff, and I don't know how you guys digiscope before focus peaking. So if you do, you're tougher than me. When I started out, here's a couple of things that really helped me to start making sharp pictures using the scope and the GH4. Number one, the focus peaking without question. Okay. Number two, using the viewfinder. If you're sitting here holding the camera like this, just like with your point and shoot camera or anything else, if I'm leaning into it using the viewfinder, I'm able to really get down in there and see what I'm looking at, see where the focus is, and that helps you get sharp shots. Okay, you're not trying to squint and try to see some little viewfinder. It's almost like using a bigger monitor when you use the built-in electronic viewfinder. The other thing is to think about how you're using the shutter. I've got this soft release button. This is from Custom SLR, and this just sticks on there, and it allows me to basically roll my finger over the shutter. Okay, you don't want to hammer your finger on that shutter. Paul, if you can show the screen here. See, if any little vibration shows up on your screen, so the more you can take that out of there, the better your shots are going to be, the sharper your images are going to be. When you're talking about 1,000 millimeters to 2,000 millimeter effective focal length, any little vibration is going to ruin your shot, is going to ruin your sharpness. So you need to really focus on minimizing vibration. Using a remote cable release does a great job for that. I know Tara Tanaka uses a video tripod head that has the arm out of the side, and she holds the remote in her hand. Okay, that works great. Speaking just briefly about a tripod head, I use this unique ball head, and it works like a ball head, but it also has this adjustment so that it works only as a pan and a tilt. Okay, that works great for digiscoping. I don't have to worry about the scope and the camera flopping side to side. A ball head really doesn't work very well for digiscoping. So I would definitely recommend something like this, or something like a video tripod head. A fluid dampened pan and tilt head works great for digiscoping, and they're really inexpensive. So just keep that in mind. Also, you don't have to focus this way with the scopes. The focus rings on these, once you get it dialed in, I literally just use my thumb and I kind of hold it like a lens here, right? That works great. Use the remote, use the timer. I'll use the 2-second timer sometimes. If I'm shooting a stationary subject, then you can set it up, get it focused, use the 2-second timer. That way you're not touching the camera when it goes off. That works great. So I hope that helps you, man. I was really frustrated with digiscoping for a long time until I had somebody who knew what they were doing, and Tara Tanaka helped me out. She took me out and said, no, do this, don't do that. Hopefully I've covered a lot of that stuff for you, and it'll help you get started, because I know once I started making sharp shots, then it's on. Now I'm trying to shoot everything with the scope. I'm shooting not just birds and wildlife, but flowers, and Paul was dragging me away from shooting a dragonfly over here, because every little thing, this is it's a pretty amazing lens, right? Start with stationary subjects. Tara was teasing me about getting birds in flight. Don't start with birds in flight. Start with things that are sitting still, that you can really work on getting sharp focus and learning how the focus peaking works if you have that feature, learning how to maximize being still and getting the shutter to trip and getting those sharp shots before you start trying to throw the thing around. I know guys that can shoot these scopes handheld, birds on the wing. That's amazing, and hopefully with practice then you'll get there too. But the Digidapter is great. Lots of light. It'll adapt to any camera. You can use whatever lens works for you, whatever point and shoot camera, SLR, mirrorless camera, whatever you need. It's a great tool. That way if you change cameras, you don't have to change adapters. You're all set with the Digidapter. So enjoy. Now I've also got the Really Right Stuff L bracket on my GH4, and I'm all about speed and convenience. So I want to be able to pop this camera off pretty quick. So in addition to my Digidapter, I've also added this Arca Swiss clamp that I got, I think, for $15 on Amazon. And Paul gave me a couple of extra pins here, the register pins, so that I can really hold that thing in tight once I get it attached to the stage like I need it. And then I can use my same Arca Swiss clamp. Now this works the same if you have, say, an Enduro ball head or Me Photo or any kind of Arca Swiss plate. You can just use this, and it has the graduations on the back here. You want to zoom into that. And then I've got a little register mark on my plate, so that I just line up the register mark with the 0, and then I know that my camera is good to go and lined up with the scope using the Digidapter.